Politis. Welcome to Study English, IELTS preparation. Today we're going to look at conditional sentences. They're sentences that use if. If you listen carefully, you'll be able to hear Dr. Malcolm Simons talking about junk DNA, the parts of DNA that people used to think were just rubbish. Listen to the different types of sentences he uses.
Under Darwinistic notions, you would think that junk would drop off under the theory of natural selection, just like species drop off if they hit ecological niches, which is incompatible with survival. If they can adapt to those niches, then those that can survive and those that can't die is the notion. If you apply that to the DNA sequence, then the coding region genes which survive have a function. And by the way, the non-coding sequences have survived as well. So the proposition would have to be that if they're there, they've got a function.
In listening to Dr. Simons, you can hear that he uses a variety of sentences. This makes for much more interesting language. You should practice using sentences of different lengths and types, especially complex sentences. Today we're going to look at one of the ways you can create complex sentences using an if clause. An if clause is a phrase that gives a condition that's necessary for something else to happen. They're often called conditional clauses. If means when, provided that, or on condition that. There are a few basic patterns for the if clause. Listen to this.
If they can adapt to those niches, then those that can survive and those that can't die. So the proposition would have to be that if they're there, they've got a function.
If they can adapt, then those that can survive. The pattern here is if, simple present tense verb, comma, followed by the word then. Then introduces a clause describing the consequences. Look at the second example in the extract. If they are there, they have a function. Notice that the then is left out in this example. Then is optional. He could have said if they are there, then they have a function. Let's look at some more. If you have a university education, then you have more opportunities. But the then is optional. You can leave it out. If you have a university education, you have more opportunities. Notice that this pattern can be reversed. You have more opportunities if you have a university education. We never include then when the pattern is reversed like this. Let's try with the example from the story. If they're there, they have a function. They have a function if they're there. Okay, now here's the second pattern for if sentences. This is for when the suggestion is less definite or less likely. If you had a university education, comma, then you would have more opportunities. The pattern here is if, past tense verb, comma, then, would plus the verb. If you had a university education, then you would have more opportunities. We use this pattern when we're talking about the future and about something that may not be as likely to happen. Compare these two patterns. If you study hard, then you will pass your test. If you studied hard, then you would pass your test. In the first example, it's a bit like making a useful suggestion. The second sentence is less definite and less polite. It suggests that the person doesn't study hard now. So that's two ways of making the conditional tense. How to say that one thing will happen or might happen if something else happens. There are other forms of the conditional tense too. If you learn them, then your English will improve. Okay, now we're going to look at ways of making opposites by using prefixes. Listen to Dr. Simons again.
Under Darwinistic notions, you would think that junk would drop off under the theory of natural selection, just like species drop off if they hit ecological niches, which is incompatible with survival. If they can adapt to those niches, then those that can survive and those that can't die is the notion. If you apply that to the DNA sequence, then the coding region genes which survive have a function. And by the way, the non-coding sequences have survived as well.
In the passage, we heard the words survive and die. They have opposite meanings. To survive means to keep on living, and to die means to stop living. We call words with opposite meanings opposites. Sometimes opposites are formed from the same word stem using prefixes. Two of the prefixes he uses are in and non. Listen.
And by the way, the non-coding sequences have survived as well.
He calls the junk DNA the non-coding sequences. Non-coding means not coding. Notice that we use a hyphen with the non prefix. Non usually forms adjectives. It means not in the group of. So we have non-European, non-Aboriginal, or non-government. Non can also just mean not, giving a negative sense to a word. Non-fiction, non-smoking, and non-stick. The prefix in is used with adjectives as well to make opposites. It forms words like insignificant, not significant, inexpensive, not expensive, intolerant, not tolerant. Another common opposite prefix is un. We can have unfair, unattractive, unusual, unnatural. But un can also be used with verbs. It means that an action is reversed. So we have undo, undress, or unbend. There aren't many rules about what sort of words take these prefixes. You'll have to learn most opposites one by one. A good way to do this is to try to find out the opposite every time you come across a new word. Finally for today, let's have a look at how you can form adjectives from people's names.
Under Darwinistic notions, you would think that junk would drop off under the theory of natural selection.
He says under Darwinistic notions. Darwinistic here is an adjective, but it's got a capital letter. Do you know why? Well, that's because it comes from the name Darwin, referring to Charles Darwin, who developed the theory of natural selection. But it's got two suffixes, ist and ick. The ick suffix forms adjectives that mean belonging to or like. So Darwinistic means like a Darwinist. But a Darwinist? Well, the suffix ist forms adjectives too, but it forms an adjective that describes a type of person with a certain set of beliefs. When ist is added to people's names, it means someone who follows that person or who believes in what they wrote or said. So we can have a Darwinist, someone who believes in Darwin's theories, or a Marxist, someone who follows the writings of Marx, or a Buddhist, someone who follows the teachings of the Buddha. Well, we're out of time for today. Remember to watch out for those opposites and try using if clauses. See you next time. Bye-bye. Hello, I'm Margot Politis. Welcome to Study English, IELTS preparation. Today on Study English, we're looking at adjectives. How do you use them? How do you order them? And how do you use them to compare and describe things? First, let's listen to some descriptions about the world under the sea in the Gulf of Carpentaria off the north coast of Australia. It's quite an amazing place.
We know more about the surface of the Moon or the surface of Mars than we do about the seafloor. The seafloor remains the last unexplored frontier. This is because it's covered by this impenetrable ocean layer that we can't see through. The only way we can see the seafloor is using sonar. The largest reef they mapped is about 10 or so kilometres across. It's an oval-shaped feature, so it covers around 100 square kilometres. Because of the fact that they are submerged in 30 metres or so of water, the reefs are very hard to see. No one had realised that the Gulf contained reefs just like the Great Barrier Reef.
Being able to describe things properly is an important communication skill. You need adjectives for descriptions. They usually come before the nouns they are describing. The red car. But when you want to accurately describe something, you often need to use more than one adjective in a row. What if the car is big, red, and made of plastic? We call it the big red plastic car. Notice that the adjectives are usually separated by commas. But why don't we call it the red plastic big car? How do you know which order to put the adjectives in? Well, for native speakers, it's just that it sounds right. But luckily, there are some rules. It's called the Royal Order of Adjectives. Let's have a look at it. First, we have the determiner. That's articles, a, an, the. Numbers, or a word that describes the amount of something. It can also be the owner, the person or thing who the noun belongs to. So determiners can be a, the, many, some, or a name like John's. So we can have a car, many cars, John's car. The second type of adjective is opinion or observation. This tells you something about the quality of the noun. Useful, cheap, ugly, beautiful. Then we have size. For example, enormous, tiny, huge. Followed by age. It could be old, modern, 7-year-old. Then shape. Perhaps oval, circular, or flat. A colour, like white, black, or blue. Then we have adjectives that describe origin, where the noun is from. For example, Thai, Indonesian, Australian. Followed by material, what the thing is made of, like copper, plastic, or wooden. Lastly is the qualifier. This is something that's an integral part of the noun. Examples might be a rocking chair, a wedding ring, an electric oven. There are, of course, a few exceptions to these rules, but it's important that you learn them and practice them whenever you can. Have a look at these words and see if you can turn them into a phrase. Wooden, square, useful, box, lilies. Well, box is the noun, but what comes first? The determiner. Whose box is it? It's Lily's box. So lilies comes first. Then that's followed by the observation. The box is useful. Then the shape. It's square. Then finally the material. It's a wooden box. So we have Lily's useful square wooden box. Good. Now let's listen to some strings of adjectives from the clip.
The seafloor remains the last unexplored frontier. This is because it's covered by this impenetrable ocean layer that we can't see through. The largest reef they mapped is about 10 or so kilometres across.
She calls the seafloor the last unexplored frontier. Let's look at that phrase. Frontier is the noun. The other words are describing the noun. First we have the determiners, the and last. Last expresses a number, so it goes second. Then unexplored. That's an observation. It's a quality of the frontier. Okay, now what about this impenetrable ocean layer? Well, layer is the noun. All the other words are adjectives. This is the determiner. Impenetrable is an observation. It describes a quality of the ocean layer. Ocean here is the qualifier. Almost part of the noun, it's not just a layer, it's an ocean layer. Okay, now you try one. Look at these words. They form a phrase that he used. Largest, reef, the. Well, reef is the noun, so it comes last. The is a determiner, so it comes first. Largest describes the size, so that comes after the. So we have the largest reef. Okay, there's another way adjectives can be used as well. They can stand alone. They describe nouns by following the verb to be. When used in this way, adjectives are complements. Listen to one here.
The Gulf of Carpentaria is very flat and featureless.
The Gulf of Carpentaria is very flat and featureless. In a phrase, this would be the very flat, featureless Gulf of Carpentaria. But used as a complement, the phrase becomes a full sentence. The Gulf of Carpentaria is very flat and featureless. We can take the phrase, the big red plastic car, and turn it into a sentence. The car is big, red and plastic. Notice that the order of adjectives still stays the same. Now let's look at how you go about describing things. It's often necessary to focus on particular features such as shape, size, dimension, weight, colour or texture. The more you have built up your vocabulary of adjectives, the better your ability to describe things accurately. So you might write up adjective lists according to groups. To describe shapes, we can say circular, triangular, rectangular, spherical, but we just say square. It's also possible to describe something by saying it's like something common. So we can say something is egg-shaped or kidney-shaped. Listen.
The largest reef they mapped is about 10 or so kilometres across. It's an oval-shaped feature, so it covers around 100 square kilometres.
When you're writing, you should always aim to make your descriptions as accurate as you can. But sometimes you can't be exact and you need to describe something approximately.
The largest reef they mapped is about 10 or so kilometres across. It's an oval-shaped feature, so it covers around 100 square kilometres. Because of the fact that they are submerged in 30 metres or so of water, the reefs are very hard to see.
Dr. Harris uses the words about, around, or so with numbers. About 10 kilometres, around 100 square kilometres, 30 metres or so. Notice that the phrase or so always comes after the number, but the others all come before. You might also hear people say around about. In formal language, we'd probably say approximately. These are all signs that the amount is not exact. And now it's around about time for me to go. I'll see you next time for more Study English. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome again to Study English, IELTS preparation. I'm Margot Politis. If you've been on a flight recently, you will have heard about the danger of sitting still for a long time in an aeroplane, apart from the danger of boredom, that is. The danger is from a condition called deep vein thrombosis, or DVT. Today on Study English, we'll listen to a doctor talk about DVT. Then we'll look at how to talk about things that might happen in the future.
Deep vein thrombosis is where a clot forms in the calf veins and occasionally in the veins of the leg, sometimes in the veins of the pelvis. And this is a great concern because the clot may dislodge, travelling with the flow of blood into the right side of the heart and from there into the lung. When we're travelling on long-haul flights, several things happen. First of all, we're stationary. We're not moving our legs, so there's no physiological compression of the calf muscles. Blood tends to sit in the veins and make clot. Number two, the environment is dry. We dehydrate. We may drink some alcohol. We dehydrate even further. Alcohol is a diuretic agent. It results in us actually drying out, and that makes the blood a little bit thicker and stickier. And these factors lead to clotting. Sometimes, perhaps particularly in the economy section of an aeroplane, we may be a little bit cramped and our leg may be slightly compressed on the seat. This could further prevent blood flow back to the heart and trap blood in the leg where clotting may occur.
Dr. Crantock was talking about things that could happen, may happen, or perhaps will happen in the future. Perhaps is an adverb. It's a word like maybe or possibly. It gives a statement the sense that the speaker is not sure if the thing will happen. Perhaps I will means the same as possibly I will or maybe I will. May and could are modal verbs. May has a number of meanings. The most common use is when you are asking permission. May I come in? Yes, you may. But the other use of may is to talk about possibilities in the future. I may come in tomorrow means in the future I will possibly come in, but it's not definite. Could has a number of meanings too. The first is ability. When I was little, I could swim, means when I was young, I was able to swim. But could is also used to express future possibilities. It could rain tomorrow. It's not definite, but it might rain. Dr. Crantock is talking about what can happen sometimes on flights, but it won't definitely happen. Listen again.
Sometimes, perhaps particularly in the economy section of an aeroplane, we may be a little bit cramped and our leg may be slightly compressed on the seat. This could further prevent blood flow back to the heart and trap blood in the leg where clotting may occur.
So for speculating or thinking about what will happen in the future, we can use adverbials like possibly or perhaps. We can use modal verbs like may and could, and we can use phrases like I guess, I imagine, I suspect. So in the clip, he says blood clotting could occur. We can also say blood clotting may occur. Blood clotting will perhaps occur. Blood clotting will possibly occur. I suspect blood clotting will occur. Notice that the adverbials can occur in a number of places in the sentence. Blood clotting will perhaps occur. Perhaps blood clotting will occur. Blood clotting perhaps will occur. Blood clotting will occur, perhaps. Listen to Dr. Crantock and the way he structures his argument. Listen for a topic sentence and for the way he lists the different ideas.
When we're travelling on long-haul flights, several things happen. First of all, we're stationary. We're not moving our legs, so there's no physiological compression of the calf muscles. Blood tends to sit in the veins and make clot. Number two, the environment is dry. We dehydrate. We may drink some alcohol. We dehydrate even further. Alcohol is a diuretic agent. It results in us actually drying out, and that makes the blood a little bit thicker and stickier. And these factors lead to clotting.
The first sentence is the topic sentence. He said, when we're travelling on long-haul flights, several things happen. So we know from this topic sentence that he's going to tell us about travelling on long-haul flights. But there are lots of things you can say about travelling on long-haul flights, so he says something else in this sentence that gives us more information. He says, several things happen. This phrase is called the controlling idea. Every topic sentence has a controlling idea. It tells us what the focus of the paragraph will be. So he's going to be discussing several things that happen on long-haul flights. In the rest of the paragraph, he lists some of the things that happen. He raises the points one by one and discusses them in detail.
When we're travelling on long-haul flights, several things happen. First of all, we're stationary. We're not moving our legs, so there's no physiological compression of the calf muscles. Blood tends to sit in the veins and make clot. Number two, the environment is dry. We dehydrate. We may drink some alcohol. We dehydrate even further. Alcohol is a diuretic agent. It results in us actually drying out, and that makes the blood a little bit thicker and stickier. And these factors lead to clotting.
Dr. Crantock says, first of all, we're stationary. This is the first factor in his argument. People are stationary or sitting still. He says, number two, the environment is dry. This indicates it is the second factor in his argument. Moving on through the argument, you can keep discussing factors by using transition signals, such as another factor is, in addition or additionally, furthermore, above all. You could also use next, but this is quite informal as well. The last reason or item in the list could be introduced by lastly or finally. It's good practice to watch out for these transition devices when listening to someone talk. They'll help you to follow an argument more clearly. Finally for today, let's look at some definitions. Dr. Crantock gives a definition of the condition he is talking about because it's an unusual medical term.
Deep vein thrombosis is where a clot forms in the calf veins and occasionally in the veins of the leg, sometimes in the veins of the pelvis.
He says, deep vein thrombosis is where a clot forms in the calf veins. This is a common pattern for giving a definition. First, name the thing being defined. In this case, it's deep vein thrombosis. Secondly, use the verb to be, is or are. Here we'd say deep vein thrombosis is. Thirdly, we can write the class. What kind of thing is it? In this case, DVT is a medical condition. So we might have deep vein thrombosis is a condition. Next, we use a word like which, who, where, or that. Deep vein thrombosis is a condition where. And finally, we give the characteristics of the thing. This could be a physical description or a description of behaviour. In the case of a medical condition, this would most commonly be the symptoms or effects of the condition. Deep vein thrombosis is a condition where blood clots form in the veins. Let's try a couple of examples. What is a computer? It stores and processes information. A computer is a machine that stores and processes information. What is an accountant? Well, we have the phrase analyses and deals with finances. An accountant is a person who analyses and deals with finances. And what is the time? The time is something that we have run out of for today. See you next time on Study English. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome to Study English IELTS Preparation. I'm Margot Politis. Today on Study English we're going to look at some of the features of formal written English. In our clip we'll hear from a man who believes that drinking water is the key to being healthy and living a long time. He's going to talk about how he came to his conclusion and how he tried to get some support for his project.
How does nature do it? What keeps body cells going, and how can we improve on that process so that we eliminate disease altogether and we live a long and healthy life? I don't think death and disease is inevitable. We stumbled on the fact that they weren't actually getting rid of carbon dioxide out of their bodies, they were neutralising the carbon dioxide in their bodies. And we found it was from the water they were drinking. When we looked at these animals and saw what they were doing, it was exactly as we'd hypothesised, and that was a great feeling, a real feeling of elation. I tried and I tried and I tried to be conventional in that sense. I went to 100 people. I wrote 1,000 letters.